Why I'm saying that is because if you look at in the space of public procurement, for example, you look at turnkey projects, the engineering projects, for example, and then you look at human capital, which sometimes, because of the affirmative action requirements, are secured for the local parties, what you're talking about in terms of labor. And then in the middle, you realize that that is abused. With all due respect, other parties who are not recognized in the cooperation instruments are involved. I think it just requires that we embrace ethics and integrity, and we honor the obligations that we entrench in our cooperation instruments.
Okay. Enoch, I'd just like you to make a very quick comment. When partnerships go wrong, who bears the cost, the real cost of this partnership failing? And if it's the host country, how can we change this dynamic?
One key word in any partnership, it's like a contract. One biggest word is the word risk. And every time, whenever any partnership is being drawn, it is important for all the partners to balance the risk where it will fall. And most of the time, when we are negotiating as a country, as a developing country on these particular arrangements, we are at a weak point, and most of the time we don't get the best arrangement in these partnerships. And obviously, when it fails, we are the one who bear the biggest risk most of the times. But it's important we incorporate. Most of the time, we always advise every kind of arrangement. Whenever they're getting involved, they need to involve the procurement aspects, procurement professionals. They are the only professional we know, and Kenneth can actually attest to it, who are trained on negotiations, business negotiations. Most of the time, they're left out, and we find the biggest percentage of that contract that is going to be implemented is through procurement, and the procurement issues are left out. And because they're left out, we don't get the biggest benefit.
So the problem is in the negotiation itself.
Exactly.
Okay. So, gentlemen, I want to start winding down this conversation. And as we do that, I want to put us in a quick fire round. So in this quick fire round, you say the first thing that comes to your mind. Don't think too hard about it. It's not an exam. Just say the first thing that comes to your mind, okay? You ready?
Yes.
Okay, so Jorge, you go first. One word Africa should never accept in a partnership agreement.
I think basically it has been said, it should never accept in a partnership agreement any deal that from the outset is clear is not going to work because it's going to impose too much into the country.
Okay. Gordon, one European energy policy that Africa must never copy.
Never.
Never.
Never. I don't know. I don't know. There's one that's never. I mean, they're coal maybe. I don't think Africa should go backwards to natural gas. I think the last thing Africa could do is to do that. Is to go back to natural gas and import natural gas.
Okay, but you have all good policies. Africa can copy them. Okay. Where am I now? Enoch. One Kenyan innovation that is ready to go global tomorrow. Okay, as you think about it. Doctor, as Kenneth thinks about it, one Kenyan innovation that's ready to go global tomorrow.
Artificial intelligence.
That's not a Kenyan innovation. In the space of energy, do you have any Kenyan technologies that you'd say Kenya is doing a really good job here, this is ready to go global, we are ready to seek a partnership on this?
Yeah, there are so many in the energy sector, but I think one which is outstanding should be just the art of extracting, steam. It is. I think that's what we can really. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Enoch, now back to you. I hope you've gotten your mind together now. So, describe Kenya's procurement system in one word. One word, just one word.
Value.
Yes. What's the word?
Value.
Value.
Yes.
Are you sure that's the truth?
It depends
Or
on
you say that because you're an insider?
It depends on which side you see it.
Okay. Kenneth, one Kenyan product we should be exporting as renewable technology. Ooh, sorry. You can use another mic. Sorry, something has happened to your microphone. That one has gone off as well? Something has happened? Okay. Sorry. Let me repeat the question for you. One Kenyan product that we should be exporting as renewable technology.
I would think about the eco-friendly ceilings that are now used in most hospitality facilities.
Ceiling?
Yes. The eco-friendly, it has the roofing side and the interior is the ceiling in itself. I think it has been tried somewhere in the game reserves in Taita Taveta. I think it is very interesting and we can really take advantage of it as a country.
Okay, and Kenya should be seeking partnerships on that to make it global.
I think we should not be quick to seek partnerships, but I think we should take a competitive advantage, noting that it is domiciled and it is our own innovation, so that then we create impact locally before we go outside. There is sufficient market in the country.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. It's time to now close this panel and make room for the next panel. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for your invaluable insights. I'm sorry we couldn't take questions from the audience. We really need to catch up on time. But if there's something I have taken from this conversation is that partnerships are not necessarily good and not necessarily bad. The key is to find a balance that works for either side. And so whether or not Kenya needs the partnerships or whether we are actually skilled negotiators at these partnerships, that's something that maybe all of us can answer. Are we skilled negotiators at these partnerships, and how can we make these conversations better, make these deals better? So thank you so much. Please enjoy your afternoon. Now I'd like to invite Julian Samboko to take us through the next part of the program.
Well, thank you very much, Zainab Wandati. Let's appreciate the panelists and Zainab Wandati through this session, 45 minutes of intense discussions on partnerships. Asante sana, Zainab, for leading us through this particular session. Ladies and gentlemen, before Julian's comes on stage, I want us to do something interesting. Tomorrow, we'll be having a masterclass. And I want that team to assist me in communicating about this particular masterclass. We want you to register for the masterclass tomorrow. So in a short while, we will be having the poster for the masterclass. There you go. It will be about unlocking financing for the energy sector from concept to bankability. What you need to do, if you want to attend that masterclass, is scan the QR code and register. Then tomorrow you get to benefit from the insights that will come from that particular masterclass, which I will be moderating. Have we done that? If you're interested in attending that particular masterclass, unlocking financing for the energy sector from concept to bankability, scan the QR code and register. Asante sana for paying attention up to this moment. Now I want to bring on stage a master of numbers. This is a journalist who knows about data, would break down data to the easiest way, should I say, palatable way. I want to invite Julian Samboko to take us through the next session, the next panel discussion, which will be about innovative financing models for Africa's energy transition, PPP models, etc. You had the PS speak about this earlier, and Julian's here will be taking us through that session. Julian's karibu sana.
Many thanks, Ibrahim Karanja. Let's appreciate him as he makes his way back to his seat. So everyone who has stood here, friends, has spoken about one thing. There is no doubt that the demand is growing, and there is no doubt that we have potential for renewable energy. The challenge is the fact that financing is a problem. And that is why we are having this conversation with my panel. because in my own assessment, the energy sector faces a trilemma. One is that demand is rising and rising fast. Two is that the fiscal space for the government to continue financing these undertakings is increasingly constrained. And that's why we're having so much conversation about debt. Now, the third pillar to this trilemma is that energy projects, by design, are heavy capex and high risk. And therefore, crowding in private capital becomes what? A challenge. So if there's a panel you've been waiting for, and not to throw shade on my predecessors, including my boss, Joe Ageo, this is it, because we're talking about the financing aspect of this. So let me call on stage Mr. Francis Denick, Lead Energy Finance at the Rome Center for Climate Action and Energy Transition at UNDP. Please join us on stage. You're welcome, sir. Let's appreciate him as he joins us. Mr. Robert Kanda Nyasimi, Chief Executive Officer and Founder at Rentco Africa. Where are you? He's here, right wing. Engineer Paul Simiyu, CEO at Sentimental Energy. Are you in the house with us? Sentimental Energy, I don't think I saw you. Welcome on stage. Then let me welcome Amro Zakaria, co-founder and director for MEA at Kyoto Network Limited, to join us on stage as well. And finally, from Fahari Aviation, Mr. Hawkins Musili, Karibu Sana, join us on stage. So gentlemen, let's, yes, the seats are enough. Do we all have microphones? It looks like we do. Karibu Sana, please take a seat. So we were meant to have a keynote from the managing director of KETRACO as per the program, but he's not around. But the critical reason for having KETRACO in that keynote is because as we speak, Kenya's master transmission plan has a funding gap of $5 billion. And because they need $250 million annually, KETRACO is currently in talks with commercial banks and pension funds to mobilize that capital. So they're trying to crowd in the private capital we are talking about. So gentlemen, welcome on set. Let me start from the extreme end. We have had the conversation right from the morning up till this point. There's potential, there's capacity for renewable energy, and financing the transition seems to be the headache. When you look at the landscape across the continent in Africa, how do you perceive the risk profile of energy projects?
Thank you very much, Julian. And I would like to thank Kenja and the organizers for convening this excellent meeting and for inviting me to participate. So the risk profile, I mean, if you boil it down to a single number, is ultimately measured by the cost of capital to invest. And on that front, of course, if you take Africa and compare it to internationally where the renewable energy investments are happening, namely, of course, China, Europe, and the US, the risk profile is, of course, extremely high. The IEA estimates that the weighted average cost of capital for renewable projects is north of 8% annually here in Kenya. And Kenya is by far not, the riskiest place on the continent, and that compares with a WACC of less than 6% in many other places. And so we all know, of course, energy is capital intensive, renewable energy doubly so. So every percentage point matters. And so yes, of course, the risk profile of Africa is in some sense part of the friction. But let me add that risk is in part, of course, actual risk to the investor. It is the uncertainty in the cash flows ultimately. But it's also a perception of risk. And so colleagues from the AFDB very often state this statistic that amongst the energy investments in Africa, the default rate is, of course, amongst the lowest. Not of course, but it is amongst the lowest. Now, that may be surprising, but the reason for it is that big energy projects, when they do happen, they end up being incredibly over-structured almost, and that also leads to an increase in the cost and in the interest rate. And so we have to get to the point where the perception among investors, among domestic investors and also international investors, of the actual risk of the projects is really commensurate with what is going on, and that alone will already be able to lower the interest rates. Thank you.
Very spot on point. And coming back to that issue of the perception of risk, because my follow-on question to that is that, is there a sovereign element to that? Because you have seen the landscape in the continent, there's default at the sovereign level, and I suspect it trickles down. But hold on to that thought. Let me cross over to Robert Nyasimi. Now, this gentleman is the man who steers any conversation around leasing in this market. Speak to us about leasing as alternative financing when it comes to the energy sector, especially given the risk profile.
Thank you, and thank you, fellow panelists. My role today is to demystify leasing, especially to the public sector players who are represented here today, by first saying that when you look at leasing and the operating leases that we do, my true competitors as your own cash and a loan. Those are the two competitors. So I have to convince you to go leasing instead of using your own money or going to the bank. Now, so leasing being an alternative way of financing, one of the things that it does to the public sector is that you are able to access the assets that you need through a leasing product that might even result in an off-balance sheet financing for you, especially entities that are governed by the International Public Sector Accounting Number 13, that is, those are government-related, and even the public entities like KenGen, who follow IFRS, if properly structured, it can result in an off-balance sheet finance, meaning you don't have to book it as debt in your book. Leasing, under leasing, we provide 100% and financing. So the requirement of you giving a deposit to be able to access a bank loan or even ECA funding, that is not an issue for us. So we're able to finance you 100%, then you're able to get the equipment that you want. The other thing that leasing solves, and very interestingly, and the CEO of KenGen is here, is that we have a leasing project that we are currently undertaking at the field that you'll face here. It's a 58.42 megawatt power plant that will be on a basis of a leasing contract. And we are going to lease those power plants without the requirement of a sovereign guarantee, which is another limiting aspect when you go the usual debt or ECA financing. Yeah? And the ticket size is 150 million, that you don't need a sovereign guarantee, properly structured. It will be off balance sheet of KenGen. And so it's an easier way to look at how to access assets without burdening yourself.
Robert, allow me to jump in at that point and just have a quick follow-up question for you, is that just how off-balance sheet is this consideration? Because I'd imagine in one way or another, it must sit as a contingent liability on someone's books somewhere.
Yeah. Remember, I've mentioned two accounting standards. The International Public Sector Accounting Standard Number 13, that standard has not been varied to mirror IFRS. So it's still, if you're a government agency, if you lease, it's still off balance sheet. Now, if you're already under IFRS, like KenGen, for example, and the power project that we are doing, which we are leasing, KenGen is not responsible for designing the power plant. That is Rentco and Toshiba, who are here with me today, will do the design, will procure, do installation of the power plant, install, do operation and maintenance. When all those aspects are done, then it almost becomes like a service contract. So we'll be invoicing a service, and since some of the payments will not be fixed, it's only that issue of becoming on balance sheet or not is when the payments are also fixed. Our payments might vary because if we generate excess power, apart from the fixed 58.42 we are supposed to be generating, then the invoice will not be same month to month. So technically now it becomes a service contract. When it becomes a service contract, then it becomes off balance sheet. And just to demystify further, all these road annuity programs that you see, all those are a form of leasing. The expressway, Nairobi Expressway, that is a form of leasing. Yeah? And all those things don't form part of the sovereign debt when the multinational lenders look to Kenya. Another final example I wanted to give, for example, the National Treasury has listed about 5,800 vehicles on behalf of the National Police. At a ticket price of 7 million, that is about 40 billion.
Yeah.
You'll never see that as a part of our sovereign debt.
Yes.
Because it's a service we are providing to government, and then it becomes off balance sheet.
Fantastic. So the point I wanted him to actually emphasize is that if you are scouting for a debt-neutral solution as far as funding is concerned, that's the sort of architecture that we're looking at. Robert, always good to have that conversation with you. Right next to Robert, we're talking about the energy sector, the risk profile. How do you assess the landscape, and what interventions could we make around alternative financing?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I said right next to. There's a...
is a question for Robert, or?
No. Please take it. Okay. Just go for it.
Repeat the question, please.
We're talking about the energy sector,
Yeah.
alternative financing. How do you assess the landscape, and what solutions do you think can be deployed in Africa?
So, Africa definitely provides a lot of opportunities for the capital that is earmarked for electricity investments. However, definitely the risk is something that causes a chokehold on the pipeline where capital can come in. So the first thing that I think we need to do is to de-risk the landscape. And one way to do that is to try to change the narrative, as my colleague here had mentioned, that I think a lot of it, the narrative has been false as well. There is nothing more risky, for example, than a property on the coast of Florida that has a very high materiality risk, where insurance companies have stopped insuring. So all of a sudden, you as an investor, if you're a pension fund, for example, and you have a lot of investments that are exposed to such risks, then you pull up and you're looking for somewhere else to deploy that capital. And I think Africa, and specifically certain countries like Kenya, the risk is low enough, or at least the risk profile is competitive enough to be able to attract a lot of these, a lot of that capital. If we take, the story of green financing and energy transition is one of like pull and push. So for example, we have a lot of pull coming from different industries that are forced to decarbonize. We have big sovereign wealth funds, like the Norwegian sovereign wealth funds. We're talking about $2 trillion of assets under management. They have already started to kind of decarbonize their investment portfolio. So where will that money go, right? This is long-term, patient capital, and that's exactly what we require here in Africa. And, Bill Gates was asked recently, like, why Africa? Why are you focused on Africa? And he said, because it's the most difficult challenges, but from that will come the most creative solutions. And the world and the global investment capital is looking for those solutions.
Well, help me understand something, because you've spoken about, for example, the sovereign wealth funds outside the continent. If you look inwards in the continent, we have got vast capital pools, especially in the pension funds, who don't seem to have appetite for our infra projects. And they will tell you that there is a trade-off between return and sustainability. They don't like saying this in public, but that's what they tell me in private. Don't you see that as a dilemma?
We had, I consulted a German company where we placed 10,000 car charging stations in Jordan. And basically all the solutions are there, just the stakeholders, even domestically, they need to speak with one another. So we went there, the pension fund, who had about $400 million, they were not allowed to invest anywhere outside, and there was a lot of attrition of funds where you had high unemployment, so nobody was contributing to the fund, and you had a lot of like retirees basically going into retirement, so you were taking money out of the fund. So they needed a viable, bankable project domestically that they can invest, they can deploy all that money in. So you're absolutely right. I mean, I think if any project keeps all the different stakeholders' need in mind, domestically, even before we go outside, we'll find more than enough capital. And just earlier, the example of GERD in Ethiopia, I agree. I have friends of mine who, I live in Abu Dhabi, so I remember we had friends who had a very low income, and what they would do is that we would go every single month to the embassy to buy GERD bonds, right, in dirhams, which is equivalent to $1. So that's something that also can be done to mobilize the savings of, let's say, the Kenyan expats who are all over the world, and they're amazing representatives and ambassadors of Kenya. They have certain savings. They would love to come and invest in Kenya. So all we need to do is just need to kind of structure certain projects. They don't have to be massive. They can be microgrid projects where they can contribute, they can invest, and they can have a better return on capital on their savings.
Wonderful. So one of the key takeaways from that point is that if you go the securitization route, and that's what he's talking about, the GAD bonds with what we have had in Ethiopia, that is one of the avenues through which we can unlock private capital coming into the sector. Let's hear from Sentimental Energy. When you look at the energy projects that we have, and we are increasingly talking about bankability, and I'm very curious to understand what really characterizes a bankable project in your view?
Thank you so much, Trevor, and
sorry, Julian.
Julian, you have the same voice. As a country, in terms of energy resources, we are abundantly blessed, especially renewables and sustainable energy resources. Again, I've heard the entire story about geothermal. Just probably tapped about less than 10% of the capacity we do have. Solar, we have wind, hydro, which is probably getting to its limit and all that. So in our space, a bankable project is a project that can be invested and generate returns over a period of time. In the costing of, in what we do, we look at the quantity of electricity that you can be able to generate in a given resource over the lifetime of the project, and then look at the cost of investment that gives you what we call a levelized cost of energy as it is. So when you get the levelized cost of energy in a unit that can be able to be less than the generated income revenue from that project, then that becomes a bankable project. Let's take a quick example of solar. In an average in the country, we receive about minimum of 3.8 kilowatt hours per kilowatt peak per day from a solar unit. The cost of production over the lifetime of this particular system, which is probably takes a lifetime guaranteed output over 80%, is around 3 shillings right now, which is probably just around 1.5 cents per unit. Our energy cost or our selling cost in most cases compared to the grid cost is about 25, 26, 29 shillings. If you can be able to look at the cost of generation, which is 3 over the lifetime of the project versus the current cost of requirement for the projects, the current cost of generation, then you can be able to realize that probably if you invested in a solar plant over the lifetime period, of course guided by the existing market contractual limits, leasing, PPS, and even cash outright purchases, then, or invested purchases, you can be able to realize that that's a very seriously bankable project. So a bankable project is the one that people to have probably a lower cost of investment versus the revenue can cost of it. Thank you.
But given what you've just said, how do you factor in the question of offtake risk? Because many times players who would be looking at the energy sector in Kenya and across the continent will tell me that we don't have the capacity of the Kenyans and the likes. We need extremely patient capital to come in to allow us the horizon, which will allow us then to be able to recoup our return. For those who are in that space, are there solutions for them in terms of mechanisms through which they can bring in their capital into this market?
Again, thank you so much. I think there's a lot of opportunities, and I might be able to reiterate what Robert and I just immediately has spoken. What they have just described is, especially the latest, is what we call blended financing. It means that, a finance project doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be huge. And I'll give 2 quick examples. About 3 years ago, when the government was trying to solarize or rather electrify Dongo Gundu and Mombasa Southern Bypass, especially arising from loss of revenue from grid investments, they were supposed to looking for an alternative lighting solution, which was basically solar, but supposed to withstand risks that come with vandalism, theft, and the likes. So what we did at that time was we looked at the product available in the market and partnered with a product that would be able to guarantee the longevity of lighting in terms of quality and in terms of equipment sustainability, then amortize that particular current investment over that period of time. If you look at that particular size of if you can be able to put it up as a solar system, or rather than be a power plant, you're looking at an investment of about 500 kilowatt peak to solarize a distance, to light up a distance of about 40 kilometers, ranging from Ritini interchange to all the way to Diani interpass change. And when we looked at it, we looked at what will be the expected grid costs for this particular client, and how long will it take for them to recover an investment cost of 500 million, and who's available to manage that process. So what we did internally with our partners right now in Kenya and in France was that we introduced something called buy-in credit model, where we amortize the expected cost of electricity bills over that period, vandalism costs, and the risk that comes with it, then provided a secure solution that was able to come in and then finance the entire project, which is now being recovered over a period of time through zero cost of cable investments, zero bills, and of course, the sustainability of having to have a crew available to be able to maintain that. That's one case. The second case is currently, we understand that because of, again, transmission challenges, together we realize that some of the sensitive institutions in the country, which are using a lot of biomass and sometimes thermal dirty fuel in terms of backup generators, are learning institutions. So we looked at how much do learning institutions pick up in terms of firewood. How much do they pay in terms of electricity costs, and how much fuel do they have to keep buying almost a weekly basis to sustain the power in regions, and that blended up with that particular cost and the guarantees that learning has to go on. We approached a local financial institution, which is Kenya Commercial Bank, and together we kind of cash blended the expected cost on capitation, fee payment, and the E&D levies that are available, then decided to develop a small product that can be picked by any learning institution, ranging from a primary school to a university that's paying probably 3, 4, 5 million shillings every month to solarize and stabilize the electricity requirement against a return, which is actually cheaper than what will have had it if they have to remain on the grid. So the thing is, once you're able to, analyze the validity and the quality of the energy product you have, look at the 3 avenues of de-risking, which is basically blended finance on a higher scale, contractual risks, which can be able to be covered in period of investment, then market forces. What's the cost of power? What my resource can be able to provide those 3 aspects, and we can be able to finance any project in this country. Thank you.
Thank you. So you captured that last trilogy that he mentioned as the avenue towards de-risking projects in the energy sector. So in case you have capital and you're wondering about the risk, that is an area of focus. Let's come to Fahari Aviation and get it from your perspective. How do you see the lay of the land as far as the risk appetite is concerned and the projects, the capital coming into the market?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Julians. And thank you to KenGen, the Ministry of Energy, for putting this up together. I think a lot of you are asking yourselves, what is a person with a Fahari Aviation background doing in an energy conference? Just to give you a short background on Fahari Aviation, we are an aviation company. We provide inspection services for large infrastructure projects. That, of course, includes power generation, distribution, and such-like projects. So going to your question, I'll leverage on the aviation space, which has been the bulk of my background. So taking, for example, either an airline or an airport, financing similar size of projects, you're looking at, in magnitude, 2 to 4 billion. Taking an airline, for example, if you're taking high-end aircraft, 10 of them together with the maintenance obligation of 12 years, you're looking at an obligation of almost $4 billion over a period of maybe, say 12 to 15 years. The other reason why aviation, I think, is important in this case is because aviation is global. And the kind of challenges that we are looking at are global challenges. You're having equipment manufacturers, you're looking at financiers who are looking at a global landscape. So that understanding has to be, I think, has to be very clear. And what we've done with experience from both a leasing perspective is you're looking at aircraft owners who are looking to place aircraft in spaces such as Africa, and they're looking at the risk profile of African operators and African countries in general. And how we generally protect from that side is creating what we call special purpose vehicles that protect the companies from both sides, both from the aircraft owner, asset owner, you can say finance provisioner, and also from the operating entity. So that helps protect both sides of the engagement and provide some kind of guarantees. I think my counterpart here has talked about the three aspects about de-risking a project, or necessarily a project. You're looking at mostly what's the cost of funds that's coming in, how that project is implemented, and what's the commercial side? What are the market forces that will enable the project to become successful? So for us, that's very important, and that's how we look at it from an aviation or airline perspective. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Certainly one of the heavy capex industries that affect the entire continent. Let me cross over back to Denik on the extreme end. So here we are. We're in an environment where we're seeing ODA contracting. And for the Global South, and Africa in particular, which has been relying on a lot of DFI financing to support energy projects, we are asking ourselves, what's the way forward as far as the de-risking element is concerned? Because if you remember, the point has been largely on blended finance. How do you see the pathway ahead?
Well, thanks for the question. It's an important one. It's one that's on everyone's mind in sort of my development sector, and it's on my mind all the time. Now, just to be clear, so blended finance is an essential instrument. And blended finance effectively relies on some component of concessional funding to come in and reduce the risk profile for the remaining investors. Now, what certainly happened in ODA is that the direct aid grant budgets have been slashed brutally. And so that's, off the cards. But my job is, in fact, to convene the DFIs of industrialized countries to help them deploy their debt resources, because that's really their game, right, into the African continent. And those resources are still there. Those resources are still there because the investments, Africa simply it has plenty of opportunity for investments. And so, of course, there's a lot of private sector investment that may want to come in, and the DFIs, they also have that on their books. And the DFIs, while concessionality may have, been reduced, they do, of course, at the very least, take a longer view than the private sector on the investment, and so you can think of concessionality at least in the tenor, sometimes even in the interest rate. But, so let's get back to this de-risking question, right? What does it mean to de-risk from the point of view of a debt investor, right? It's to make those cash flows as certain as possible, right? And so that requires, that effectively requires a predictable regulatory environment and ultimately a PPA that you can trust, right? Because those are the cash flows that are going to be used to service the debt. Now let me bring in the point of foreign exchange, okay? So it's of course very important that Ethiopians invest in their own infrastructure, that Kenyans invest in their own infrastructure, but the scale of the challenge in the very highly capital-intensive energy sector means that foreign investment is going to have to be a part of the solution, okay? And that comes, as we know, in hard currency. Ultimately, the receipts of power generation, they come in local currency. There is somewhere along the chain, there will be the mismatch, right? Now, we've heard, in fact, the principal secretary earlier and the others, quoting in Kenya all prices in cents per kilowatt hour. And in fact, almost all PPAs in this country are quoted in US dollars. But the utility does not charge in US dollars. And so the mismatch sits where? On the utility. Yeah. Now that brings us to the link between foreign exchange risk and off-taker risk. Everyone I talk to says that the largest component of the remaining risk that we cannot, do away because we don't have the concessional resources, we don't have the grants, etc., is in off-taker risk. And part of the off-taker risk comes because the dollar is appreciated and the debt servicing cost has been put on the balance sheet of the off-takers, making those balance sheets riskier. So we have to think going forward about an alternative path. Do we continue to require US dollar denominated PPAs? Or do we try to put that risk somewhere else, thereby reducing off-taker risk? If we keep with the US dollar denominated PPAs, it will be off-taker risk going forward. Even if temporarily the shilling is doing fine, that is the risk that the investor will perceive. And so there are solutions to foreign exchange risk. And I mean, it will be no surprise, I and many people don't believe that national utilities are the ones best placed to bear that risk. In fact, the Brazilian government has just put in place a very new innovative instrument for foreign exchange cover that allows that risk to be put off the balance sheet of the off-takers, but also for it not to be borne by the investors. Even DFIs do not want to have to take currency risk. The SPVs won't be able to take currency risk, and so I just, not to go into the details, but we have to think innovatively about foreign exchange risk. There are mechanisms, but it requires international cooperation on these matters, bringing in partnerships with the multilateral development banks to create instruments that are fit for purpose for every nation. I encourage you all to look at the Brazilian example and try to find ways to make that example fit the Kenyan needs.
Let me hold you there because that's a very important point. And before I come to Robert, let me jump over to Emro first. And to that point, I want to flip it in the sense that one of the arguments that we have had is that there is a necessity of Kenyan African economies to deepen their capital markets to essentially deal with the wrong way risk he's talking about. Because your debt or your capital is FX denominated. Your proceeds are in cash. How do we go about deepening that capital markets for that?
Yes. So I've never seen a vibrant economy that doesn't have a deep and liquid capital markets. So that's definitely one. Again, when we talk about like bringing all the stakeholders together, that's the financial system is definitely a major stakeholder that has to be on the table, and we have to be encouraged by maybe implementing friendly policies to deepening the capital markets of the country. Also to the point that the energy sector is definitely capital intensive. So one, I think, successful blueprint that can be used for big commercial electricity generating projects is the Binban solar projects in Egypt. Egypt was able to pull this through, and now it's used as a textbook project where they were able to raise $4 billion. And they didn't have it then. Their risk profile did not qualify them to receive all that money, but because with the help of different DFIs, whether it be the IFC as well as the EB, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, EBRD, they were able to create a bankable project that brought in 30 different parties from the private sector that brought in with their money, because finally there was some level of guarantee, either the offtake cash flow guarantees or some currency hedging mechanisms that were in place, and that's why they were able to access those funds. And now it's one of the biggest solar projects, definitely in Africa and in the world probably. So just to get back to your question, having a deep liquid capital markets is something that will attract more capital that is willing to take the risk on a place like Africa.
Certainly. Let me cross now back to Robert. And the question, Robert, here is, whenever we talk about funding energy projects, one of the key questions that comes is the question of the ticket size. Because a lot of the capital, the sloshes around will tell you, any ticket below, what, $5 million, we're not interested. Too tiny, too fragmented, we don't have the business with that. When it comes to leasing, how do you go about this valuation aspect?
As indicated before, leasing solves a CapEx problem. It's not about the ticket size that matters. It's about adopting a more efficient way to access capital. For us, I remember my first leasing contract I wrote was for $10,000. And my customer was Bamburi Cement at the time. So I was least interested of how much the lease, the ticket size was. I'm more keen who my customer was. Because I knew once they test, and they did it on IT, any asset that depreciates is an expense, so treat it like an expense. So I knew once they got their 10 laptops, they never went back. Shortly, it went to $100,000. and it increased accordingly. Now, the kind of solution that we offer, we've started from those 10,000 tickets. Now we're talking $150 million, what we're doing with KenGen. Hopefully in the next 2 weeks we'll be on the ground. Now we do infrastructure leases, yeah, like what we are doing with KenGen as well. And there is no, as I said, it solves a CapEx problem. So we look to who is the off-taker, yeah? For example, like now what Ketraco is trying to do. They have said they want to raise 111 billion by front-loading their 17-year CapEx requirement. Yeah. You get? So it means they want to get the 111 billion today so that they can do all the transmission lines. That can be done under leasing instead of going to the commercial banks, which will be very limiting. The moment you go to the commercial banks, there will be a requirement for a deposit. You require some support from Treasury, whether it's a letter of comfort, whatever it is. All those requirements delay the acceleration of the project. You already know how much this transmission line costs, yeah, and you have a CapEx for it. So solution it by asking leasing companies to give you a leasing proposal. So leasing has variables. One is the cost, which was already known to you. Yeah. The second thing is the interest rate applicable. Will be the same rate if you went to the bank. That is what the leasing company will apply. The third thing is the period, which will be determined by you. You want a 5-year lease, 10-year lease, you determine that. Then the fourth thing that now varies from one leasing company to other is what we call the residual value. Yeah. That is my appetite to look at this and say, as a leasing company, how much equity am I putting via residual value in that project? And once all those are known, then working out the monthly lease payment becomes very easy. You get? And then whatever you're going to pay as a leasing cost can actually be translated into a tariff, like the case we did with KenGen. Yeah. First quoted them 6.8 US cents per kilowatt hour. Then, because things improved, we even gave them a further discount to 5.65. You get? We're able to reduce something that had already been awarded. And that is the advantages of leasing. The flexibility it offers, you're able to achieve your whatever project that you're doing in a faster way. And whether it's $10,000, $100 million, it is based on your capacity to pay. So we don't have a minimum or maximum value that we look at.
Robert, that was a very smooth way to chime in your pitch to Ketraco there. I hope they were listening. And pension funds and bankers, your lunch is being eaten live on TV here. You wanted to chime in?
Yeah, I really wanted to chime in on leases generally and operating leases, as I think leases have been used in our industry since aircraft have been flying. And it's mostly to the reasons that you've said, Robert. The capital investment upfront is significant. And I think my congratulations to yourself and the KenGen team for structuring that to something that is workable in this space. I'm just surprised it's the first time that this is happening. So what has happened in our industry is, for example, an airline would want to come out and operate 15 aircraft, and they have no intention of owning them. They are looking at maybe a 10 to 12-year operating lease, and at the end of the lease term, what ends up being is just you return the asset and you can transition to another aircraft. The good thing about us is we're dealing with technology that's changing a lot. Yeah. That gives us, as an operator, an advantage of transitioning to newer technology when that time comes. Because 15 years down the line, the kind of aircraft that will be operated at that moment in time will be very different from what you're seeing at this moment. So leasing, I think, takes out a lot of that upfront capex investment. The other bit that needs to be, that has transitioned a bit in the last 2-3 years is the reporting system. IFRS has brought different treatments for leases, and I think for any corporate entity getting into that will need to look at the impact, especially on the use of the asset itself in terms of capacity utilization and what that can do to either your P&L and balance sheet as well.
Thank you. Sentimental, any point to add?
I think I'll be able to add on just to complement what I said in the beginning, that apart from trying to take care of the forex risk that also majorly affects the cost of capitation in energy projects locally. We need to find a way of stabilizing our revenue in energy projects. When we can be able to predict our earnings from the projects, that means mitigate the risk that comes with the project production, operations, and then over a period of time in terms of contracts availability, then we can also be able to project a perceived risk in the investment and allow for attracting even lower cost kind of capitation. And this one can quickly be done through, just having bankable contracts, long-term contracts, better leases, long PPS, government incentives like now what we have in the country as a feed-in tariff, which is yet to take place. If we can be able to actualize such kind of instruments, believe me, every person, every finance that's available that can be able to believe in long-term but guaranteed output can be able to manage and invest in such kind of capital projects. Yeah. Lastly is insurance mitigation aspects. We should be able to understand that markets can become volatile just because of political reasons. If we can be able to find instruments, we can be able to also support and underwrite such kind of political risks. Kenya, we are better off, but now we're operating in an environment that is probably regional and global, where we are the epicenter of some of these particular innovations. And if we can be able to get an ability to have insurance undertakings, can be able to also support us in assured revenue in times of difficult political times, I guess we can be able to unlock most of these investments. Thank you.
Thank you, friends. I can't believe my director is flagging me that our time is out. I want to give each one of you 30 seconds for your closing thoughts. Exactly 30 seconds, starting from the extreme end.
Yeah, I'll get back to what my boss said earlier at the partnerships event, that risk and investment is, of course, very much a private sector question, and it should be, but partnerships with development institutions can really help move the needle on these issues. We can convene, we can bring together the low amounts of ODA and the concessional finance, but we can also bring across know-how from all the different places where we're working on. So consider partnerships with us as you move forward.
Thank you. Robert?
Thank you for that. My final comments, especially the public entities that are here, KenGen, KETRACO, and everybody, is that leasing is anchored both in the PPP Act and also the PPDA Act. My advice is to you is to look at the PPDA Act if you want to accelerate leasing as a product. Under the procurement and the definition, it is defined procurement is the supply, hire, or leasing of an asset. If you go that route, it is much, much easier to reach closure than going through the PPP Act. Please note the PPP unit is based in Treasury, but Treasury, when they lease, they use the PPDA Act. So maybe they're not sharing the secret. But that is the act that they are using. And so that is the best way you can close your transactions much faster, and you're able to get the benefit of leasing much quicker.
Thank you, Robert. Amro?
The global green energy transition provides a lot of opportunities for a place like Kenya. Energy demand is growing, is exponentially, and countries that are able to tap into their clean energy capacity, production capacity, they'll be able to attract a lot of capital into their domestic economies. So this is a low-hanging fruit for Kenyan economy.
Thank you. I think we are 90% plus renewable in terms of our energy mix in the country. We have the entire assets of policy infrastructure to be able to attract and take it to 100%, but not just be that as a country, but be able probably to be a regional balance. If we can be able to, regional powerhouse, if we can be able to operationalize the Energy Act 2019, energy law, and be able to blend it up with the least cost power development plans that are available in 2020, 2030, 2020, 2025, that calls for structured but bankable PPPs, long-term lease contracts, feed-in tariff policies. We can actually not just be self-sufficient in terms of energy, but actually can be able to be a powerhouse in Africa for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Final comment here.
Thank you. I think the requirement has already been established in terms of the need to make sure there is population access to electricity, and there is also empowerment of the economy to reap the benefits of affordable energy. So I think this calls for deal structuring to be able to be innovative in deal structure, to be able to access the funds to power the entire value chain, be it energy production, distribution, transmission, and all that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Friends, shall we appreciate the panel for their insights on innovative financing? I'd like to invite you to stand up for a photo shoot. And as we do that, is just to run through the key takeaways from this. So there's a lot of liquidity around. What we need is bankability of our projects. And what do we mean? Your cash flows must be predictable. And from the government side, we need a stable and predictable regulatory environment. The Energy Act of 2019, and especially open access, we are still very keen on that. And we are also talking about things like FX risk, foreign exchange. There are mechanisms through which we can de-risk that and ensure that, gentlemen, you can smile a bit for the photo. It looks like it was a very intense discussion. Are we right? Thank you very much. You may resume your seats. Asanteni sana. At this point, we are transitioning into lunch. I wish we had a whole conference to this conversation on innovative financing. Frank, where are you from, KenGen? Frank? Frank, yeah, that's your memo from here. We are breaking for lunch, and I'd like to invite Ibrahim to guide us on that.
Asante sana, Julians. A better round of applause for Julians and the panel that we had here. Like you mentioned, indeed, we are just about to break for lunch in the next very, very few minutes. But before we do that, I also want to invite the panelists who were in the first panel moderated by Zainab Bondati, also for a photo op, tafadhali. If you sat in the first panel that we had here, accompanied by Zainab Bondati, naomba, let's approach the stage for a quick photo, tafadhali. Please, thank you very much. Let's appreciate them as they come. Onsongo and all our able team members, tafadhali, let's try and do this as quick as possible. Those who sat in Zainab Bondati's panel. And Zainab herself approaching. Do we still have those who sat in the very first panel with Joe Ageo? Do we have any of them around? If we do, tafadhali, also make your way to the stage for a quick photo session. Very, very quick. Thank you very much. I love the smiles. Asante sana. Let's appreciate them one more time. Members of the very first panel that was moderated by Joe Ageo. Anyone who's still around? I want to see all those who are still around. Please make your way to the stage for yet another quick photo session. And as we do that, let me appreciate all our partners. Of course, I will name them. Sentimental Energy, asante sana for partnering with us. Kenya Electricity Generating Company, KenGen, Rentco Africa Limited, Sentimental Energy Company, Global Green Growth Institute, Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority, Stima Sacco, Power Flow Solutions Kenya, Kenya Pipeline Company, WTS Energy, Stima Investment, Kenya Electricity Transmission Company, NCBA, Rural Electrification, and this is REDEC, Cooperative Bank of Kenya, Aquila Staff, Fahari Aviation, UNDP, Nestle Kenya Limited, Finsco Africa, Nation Media Group, of course, goes without saying, and the Ministry of Energy, the State Department responsible for this particular sector. Now, in the next very few minutes, I want to invite the Vice Chancellor, Dedan Kimathi University of Technology, Professor Engineer Peter Nganga Mushiri, to make very, very brief remarks. Sir, from your remarks, we are headed for lunch. So, he's the man standing between us and lunch. Karibu sana, Prof.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. First of all, I'm very grateful to represent the university and academia in this session of renewable energy. conference. And certainly, as a good partner of KenGen, we've been collaborating for the last 20 years on different projects, capacity building and research. And certainly for the academia, it's very important that we note that we play a very important role, because we cannot grow renewable energy without developing the important resource, which is human capital that is required to drive innovation, drive change, and drive creativity. So from the university sector, we look forward to partnering more with KenGen and the energy sector in developing the relevant human capital for the industry, and engaging in lifelong learning and also continuous professional development, and also very, very important in research and development. I was very happy when I heard about the question of which innovation are we taking to the market next. And I think it is through the partnership of industry and university that we can be able to effectively answer that question. So I'm also here to open the doors to the university, especially Dedan Kimathi University of Technology, which is very highly specialized university of technology, that you can use our university as your lab. Let's come and co-design together, co-develop together, and co-innovate together so that we can provide solutions that are required in the coming year. So thanks a lot, and thank you for the chance. Asante sana.
Asante sana, Prof. Let's appreciate him one more time. He has made it short and sweet. He has not stood for long between us and lunch, and this is that time we've all been waiting for. Mealtime in Africa, mealtime in Kenya is very important. So I want us to agree on how much time we want to have lunch, because we are really dragging behind on schedule. In the program, it was indicated that we'll have lunch for 1 hour, from 1:15 to 2:15. Ladies and gentlemen, it is 4 minutes to 2 as we speak. So if you are to stick to the program, we'll all have 15 minutes for lunch. But that is not practical, is it? Do we agree to have 40 minutes? Is that 40 minutes, so that we are all here by 2:40? All right? So I invite you for lunch. I want to request anyone in a blue lanyard, like mine, to exit first. You'll be taking your meal cards from the entrance, that is to those who will be given meal cards. Vera there. Vera tafadhali. Vera, please step in. That is Vera. Anyone in a blue lanyard, you will exit first, then take a right from right outside the tent and go to the tent right behind the spa. Then those of us in orange lanyards, we will leave immediately after. We all have 40 minutes for lunch. Let's enjoy lunch. Karibuni sana. Blue lanyards first. Blue lanyards first. Asante sana. Let's enjoy lunch. DJ, you're also invited for lunch.
Some people, the 3 months growth is a bit small. 4 months growth is now starting to show. 5 months now is okay. So I would say 3 to 5 months. 3 to 5, remember, if you overstay with your growth, sometimes, normally, if you overstay with growth, what happens? The growth overweighs the technology.